All right, here we are. Welcome back to the Stronger Stride podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We are exceptionally excited today because we have a world record holder in the house with us. We have got the wonderful Phil Gore, who is the current and recent Backyard Ultra world record holder. He recently ran 119 loops at the Dead Cow Gully Backyard Ultra, going almost 800 kilometres over 5 days. How you doing, Phil?
Not too bad. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. We are super excited for this chat. I think there is so much that we'd love to ask you and so much that the listeners probably want to know. But if you want to take us back a little bit to where kind of the Backyard Ultra world started for you, when you kind of first heard of doing a Backyard Ultra, where the idea came from for you. Obviously, you'd been running before then, but how did the Backyard Ultra world kind of come into your thoughts and where did that all start?
So my first backyard ultra was Birdie's Backyard in August of 2020, so about 5 years ago now. Before I'd even heard of a backyard ultra, I'd done this thing with my mate, which was 24 park runs in 24 hours. And
That's quite
basically,
fun.
yeah, just drove around to 24 different locations around Perth, doing a park run at each location. Effectively, it was about 5Ks every hour, but we weren't like strict as in starting on the hour every hour. You know, we had a longer break for lunch. Some park runs were close together. Some park runs were a bigger drive apart. But over the 24 hours, it averaged 5Ks every hour. So that was kind of my precursor to a backyard. So when I'd heard of this backyard, I'm like, okay, so we're doing 6.7Ks every hour, but it's on the hour every hour, and there's no finish line. Like we're not stopping at 24 hours; it just keeps
Mm.
going. I'm like, well, I've done the 24-hour park run. I know I can do that. You know, an extra 1.7 Ks per hour. I think that's achievable. Let's just go into it, see how I go. I have a feeling I can get to 24 hours, but I really want to sort of see where my limits are, see how much further I can go past 24 hours. And yeah, I'd really had no idea that this backyard ultra was like this worldwide phenomenon.
Mm.
Like I hadn't heard of anywhere else in the world doing it, so I didn't know like what sort of distances are other people running, like what's a good distance or what's a good amount of time to run in these things. So I really just went into it like blind and a little bit naive, which I think kind of would have helped me push that little bit further, like not knowing what a limit might be.
Mm.
And so in that event, yeah, I ended up running 39 hours,
Wow,
finishing as the assist.
that's
And
insane.
yeah, especially for my first one. And then like I was pretty broken for like the last 4 hours. So I thought it was pretty impressive to push through those last 4 hours feeling really broken. So I was pretty satisfied that I'd pushed myself as far as I could go at that 39 hours. And then after the event, I found out that we were only like I think it was 2 hours behind the Australian record.
Huh.
And then that's when I found out, oh, there's a record for this. Like there's other places in Australia that are doing this. There's other places in the world that are doing it. And knowing that I was like only 2 hours away from the Australian record, I was like, well, that kind of put me in like the top four. And I'm like, well, I might actually be kind of good at this. Like, and I didn't train specifically for this. I didn't really have a plan or any structure. So how much better could I do if I actually made this a focus? And yeah, so that's I decided to pull out all the stops and started working with a coach, started looking at areas I could improve in the backyard in terms of like the logistics and the organizing and the planning side of it. And yeah, went into my next backyard about it would have been about 6 months later. And by that time, the Australian record had been pushed up a little bit to 46 hours. And so I kind of had that as a goal, but I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to like still see how far I could go. But I kind of had a better idea now of where I really need to sit to be top in Australia. And so that event ended up doing 48 hours. So I set the new Australian
Mm.
record and yeah, just kind of been improving on it ever since.
Wow, it's incredible. Like it's so hard to fathom. I think all of these numbers can sound really just hard to comprehend for someone who, maybe has only run for an hour before. Like 48 hours is unreal. But I guess to you now, does that 48 or the 39, does that feel really small in comparison like to what you're able to do now? Obviously we know now you can run 119 plus, who knows how much further you could go. Does that feel kind of insignificant now, or do you still feel like obviously at the time it was such a big deal because at that moment that was as much as you've ever done?
Yeah, well, at the time it was a huge deal.
Mm,
Yeah, like as I said, it was an Australian record.
mm.
And yeah, even at the time, I think the world record was 75. So we're still a while off of that, but I mean, 75 compared to 119,
Yeah.
like doesn't seem that big now.
Mm.
But yeah, I do like 48 hours, it's still a long time. Like I'll still do a backyard today and I'll be running and I'll be at the 24-hour point or the 48-hour point, and it still feels like I've been there a long time. Like when you look back on the event, you just think, oh yeah, those 24 hours, that was nothing.
Mm.
But when you're there in the moment and you've been running for 24 hours, it does feel like you have been running a long time. And you kind of, I think you forget that sometimes. You think, yeah, I've done events before where I've run, you know, 96 hours or 100 hours. 24 hours is nothing really. But yeah, then you get back to that point and you're like, it actually can feel really hard, and you're a bit like not shocked, but you just yeah, you feel like it shouldn't feel that hard at that point, but it does. But with the backyard, yeah, you just got to keep pushing, and then I think it in a way it does get easier the further you go, um, because you can kind of your concept of time can change. Whereas the first 24 hours might really drag out, the last 24 hours might seem to go a lot quicker in comparison.
That's so interesting. I remember, and I'm sure you wouldn't remember this because you had probably everyone speaking to you, but we spoke briefly at Sydney's Backyard Ultra, and you'd mentioned that you didn't feel good usually until kind of the third night. And that concept was really interesting to kind of understand because for most people, trying to even think about still running, 3 nights later would be just so hard to imagine. And you would imagine that you would be in a lot of pain. You'd obviously be much more sleep deprived than when you first started. And it's really interesting to hear how kind of each day can evolve and you can have different feelings. And I think if you hadn't had any experience with this world, you would think, okay, day one, like you're pretty fresh, you haven't, slept well, you're not too fatigued, you've been eating well the days leading up, and then things would get worse and worse. But to hear that sometimes that first day is almost more challenging than later on, or time just feels a little bit different as it goes on, is really interesting. Do you remember the whole experience? Like when you're going for that long, afterwards reflecting on it, does it become really blurry? Does it kind of all blend into one, or do you have really kind of distinct memories from each of those stages, or how do you sort of view it kind of retrospectively?
Yeah, I remember most things in the right order. I might not get the laps exact, but I kind of have a rough idea of when things happened. I'm very good with, or my crew's very good with taking notes as well. So every lap I've got a plan for what I'm going to do, but then there's also a space on the plan to write what's happened. So if something happens, like, I don't know, I start getting a pain in my knee, for example, I make a note of that on the plan. And then, yeah, like 3 days later, I might not have that pain anymore. I might have totally forgot about it. And then, like, oh, hang on, I did have the pain. Like, when was that? And we'll look back on the plan. It's like, oh, yeah, that was like hour 12. But you complained about it then, and then, yeah, it was resolved and you didn't talk about it again. So, yeah, I'm good with like taking notes like that. I mean, there have been events where I wouldn't say delirious, but I've got a little bit confused. If my nutrition's not right or my sleep isn't right, uh, the mind can start to wander a bit and I can get a little bit confused. And so I've had events like that where like a period in the middle or towards the end has kind of started to blur together and I haven't been 100% sure what's going on. And when I look back on that, I'm like, oh, what happened there? Or why was I like that? Or something. I think for the most part, like especially my recent ones, they've just all gone really well. And I do have a clear idea of what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of that comes down to just very meticulous planning. And by the sounds of it, your prep for the crew is just, I mean, it just sounds like it's really, really good and it's really thought out. And I guess like you've had enough experience now to trial and error different things. How has that sort of evolved? Because obviously, like, yeah, the more you've done, the more you've understood. And it sounds like that sort of, I don't know if it's like actually a physical handbook or a manual or whatever it is that you have for the crew, you know, they've got their space there to write that stuff. How much has that evolved and how much does that play a role in what you're actually able to achieve?
Yeah, so it's evolved a lot over the years. The first event I went into, I had no plan, no structure at all, but I did take a notebook with me and I did make notes of, what I was eating at each hour and, if I changed my shoes or what time I was coming in, things like that. But then, yeah, as I said, when I went into my second one, I wanted to be a lot more planned and organized. So I printed up a spreadsheet and I had things on there like what pace I'm going to run and reminders like I need to put on sunscreen or things like that. And then, but in terms of like nutrition, I would write on the plan, okay, you're having lunch now or you're having dinner, but it wouldn't be specific. And then it's at the point now where it's like, at this hour, you're eating a ham and cheese wrap. Then the next hour, you are eating a chocolate custard. Then the next hour, you're having Coke and Pringles or whatever it is, but it's very specific and it's broken down. And I follow that very closely. There's a few times like I'm not super rigid in that I have to eat that. But most times I'll come in and whatever's on the plan, I'm able to eat. But I do leave the option open that I can change that if I want. The same with the paces. So I plan out every single pace that I'm going to run. So I can look up any lap between one and when the end of my plan is, which for Dead Cow Gully, for example, I went up to lap 192. So you can look up any lap and it will tell you exactly what time I'm going to run that lap in. So when my wife was watching on the live stream and she sees me running, she can look at my plan and be like, okay, he's doing a fast lap this time. So she knows where I'm meant to be on the live stream and stuff like that. But those paces, they can change a little bit of it as well. So like, for example, on day 5, the days were getting a lot warmer. And I figured if I was running my laps faster, then I could get into the shade quicker. I can get with my fan and my ice quicker. So when on the plan it said I might need to run a 50 or 52-minute lap, I was coming in closer to 45 minutes just to get out of the sun quicker. So yeah, the plan does change a little bit, but for the most part, it's very structured and it's very easy to follow. It's very easy for my crew to follow. They just need to read what hour we're on and they know exactly what they need to do for the break.
That sounds so helpful. And that must just be a huge part of how it all goes so smoothly, right? Because you all know exactly what to do. There's no thinking, there's no extra decision-making time going back and forth of do you want this, do you want this? It's just all happening. Do you find that there's ever any negatives to that? So, you could kind of wing it and go with the flow and have what you feel like and kind of make it a bit more free-flowing. But if you're really structured and meticulous, if things start to come away from that, so you just described there where you started to go a bit faster because the conditions change. But let's say, for example, it went the other way. If you started to slow down or you started to feel nauseous and not feel like the foods that you had planned, has it ever happened where it's kind of stressed you out a little bit that you're maybe falling off what was planned? Or does it just happen where you just stick to it and you've never really deviated in the kind of negative way?
It definitely has happened in the past. More recently, I'm getting a lot better with, if something does go wrong or doesn't go to plan, I start running slower or I'm not able to eat what's on the plan. I'm just better at, I'm better at handling it. Like I don't stress out about it. Like in previous events where, I haven't been able to eat and then, I'm starting to stress that I'm not getting my energy and it kind of has like a snowball effect. Yeah, when it's happened recently, like it happened at Sydney and it happened at Dead Cow that I was getting nauseous on that first night, instead of freaking out about it, I'm like, well, let's just step back a bit. Let's eat what I can, we'll drink what I can, I know when the sun comes up, I'm going to be feeling better. So let's just get through to that point. I know that if I don't eat the full amount of calories on my plan, that's not the end of the world. That's not going to end my race. So I just like remind myself of those things and I can just kind of swing with the punches. But yeah, I'd say more often than not, everything does seem to go to plan. But yeah, when I have those moments where it's not going to plan, I'm not freaking out about it.
Yeah, I feel like for any ultra runner, like dealing with stuff just not quite going well is like such a big part of it. And it's such an interesting thing because, also having a plan is so important, yet being able to be like coping with things not going to plan is so essential, right? Because there's just so many factors. Although it sounds like for you, you have just like, you know, you're repeating this same thing in the same process, and you've got this like really dialed nutrition plan that just seems to really work. And for the most part, you're able to follow it. And you've also got that resilience to deal with, you know, if it doesn't go great. What about from like body injury, blisters, chafing kind of perspective? Have you ever had anything go majorly wrong with that, like in any of the recent ultras, and being able to sort of come back from it, or anything that's kind of totally derailed you in a race?
Yeah, so when I was at Big's Backyard 2 years ago, so that's the World Champs in Tennessee, I did have an issue with my leg. It was actually the tendon that's responsible for lifting up the big toe.
Mm.
So that I started to get pain in that from I think it was about 72 or 73. And yeah, we tried a few different things. I think we were able to kind of um, delay it a little bit, but it did get a little bit worse kind of each lap, to the point where like in the mid 80s, I was thinking I've got 1 or 2 laps left here, but I just keep bringing it back to the present moment and just think, just focus on the next lap. You just got to get through the next lap. And even though everything's kind of crashing around outside of that, ultimately all I have to do is I have to finish that lap in an hour. And then while I'm out there running, my crew's going to, you know, kind of troubleshoot and brainstorm and see if we can come up with something to help get me out on the next lap after that. So, you know, we tried different strapping techniques. You know, we're using Panadol, where, you know, trying hypnosis, you know, trying different foods. But yeah, I think when one thing starts going wrong, it can have a negative effect on other things. So for example, when my leg was starting to go, I'm not doing my laps as quick, and I'm not having as much time to eat in the break, or not as much time to sleep. So then my nutrition and my sleep is affected, and it can have a flow-on effect. So yeah, with that event, yes. So that's one of 2 events that I've DNF'd. So the other one being my first. And even though I DNF'd, I'm still very, like, I look back on it and I'm still very proud that I was still able to get to 100 hours, especially when those problems started in the 70s. And in contrast, when that happened on my first backyard and I started having problems at lap, I think it was lap 34 or lap 35, I was only able to make it to lap 39. Whereas this time when those problems started happening, I was still able to push it out like another day and a bit. So even though ultimately it didn't get better and I didn't overcome that problem, I was still able to stick out the event for a lot longer than I initially thought I'd be able to.
Do you think that's the key difference then with someone like yourself who is the best in the world at this and someone who might not go as far? Obviously, there's so many factors, right? Like we can't compare everyone, everyone's on their own journey. But for you to be able to handle a significant amount of discomfort for a couple of hours when you first started, and now to be able to handle 30 plus hours of, you know, being in some pain and having all these problems come up, do you think the ability to handle, once it starts to get really, really hard, to be able to handle that, is that the key to kind of be successful at these events? Is it being able to be resilient when those things go wrong? Do you think that is where you've seen the most improvement?
I think it's definitely a big part of it, but I think for me, it's more like I kind of train my body to a point where I go into these events and I don't have those issues happening. So yes, it did happen at Bigs, but if I look at my recent races at, you know, Dakar Gully, at Sydney, at the Sat Champs, I never really got to a point where I felt I had to really dig in mentally to push through a lot of pain. It was just I'd kind of conditioned my body to the point that I didn't reach those levels where I had to deal with that pain. And I feel like if in one of those events, if I did get to that point, um, I would still I'd still know that I probably have another 24 or 36 hours in me if I reach that point. So yeah, having that experience before has kind of showed me what I can push through. But I think, yeah, the bigger thing for me is kind of delaying that point for as long as possible.
Yeah, so I guess like, do you think then, because I guess, yeah, there's 2 parts, right? Like, do you think that you have trained your pain tolerance to be better than average? I mean, I'm sure better than average, right? But like, yeah, it sounds like that you don't think that's your differentiating thing. You think it is more about your ability to train yourself to handle these distances. Like, is that stuff that you kind of like differentiate at all in your training, or you're really just focusing on, as you said, the physical conditioning side of it?
Yeah, I probably focus more on the physical conditioning. I think I do probably have quite a high pain tolerance. So when I say I'm not feeling pain, if you put someone else in that exact same position that I was in, maybe they would perceive it differently. And I think even if you put me, say you could, if you could put me from how I felt, how I was at lap 1, and then suddenly transport me to how I was at lap 119, I might suddenly be like, oh, what the hell has happened? Like, why am I in so much pain? But because it's built up gradually, like ever so slightly lap after lap, I'm just adjusting to it each time. And then so by the time, when I am running at lap 119, maybe I am in pain, but I just don't really notice it because it's just come on like ever so gradually.
It's so
It's like-
interesting. Sorry, go,
I was
Liz.
gonna say this is not that important, but to me the first thing I'm thinking of, it's like that experiment where there's like the frog
lobster in the water?
That's what it is, yeah. And like they don't notice that it's boiling until they die.
That's what I was thinking.
And not to suggest that you're at all like a lobster or a frog or whatever it is, but I mean, it does make sense that like it is just building up over time, and there's like this habituation as you go along. Say what you were gonna say, Soph.
Well, just speaking on the 119, I'd love to go into some specifics around Dead Cow Gully. I'd love to know how you handle pressure and expectations, because obviously you have done really well in Backyard Ultras, you've done really well at this event, and you've built a bit of a name for yourself, and you had the world record, and you had this kind of, the Dead Cow Gully, there was you and Sam and Harvey, and there was a whole bunch of people that were going to go really far, right? There are a lot of people around Australia and around the world were kind of expecting this event to go really long. And I guess that's something unique with the Backyard Ultras is, you could have you in an event with a lot of amateurs and no one will really expect it to go that far because you need 2 people to go really, really far. But with Dead Cow, there was this expectation that it was going to be a really big event and possibly a world record. How do you handle the pressure, the expectations? Is there camaraderie amongst you and the other guys who are at the top in the world? What is that kind of like being at that level now? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so like going into this event, like people like to throw around big numbers. They like to, Sam Harvey was saying he's going to get to 150. A lot of people saying that the world record is going to go down at this event. Going into this event with 4 people having done over 100 before and, another half dozen having done over 80, like there is, there's good reason for people thinking that this is going to be a big event, but I try not to get caught up in those numbers. It doesn't matter if I'm doing an event where, it's expected to go 40 hours or if I'm doing an event where it's expected to go 100 plus hours. I approach it exactly the same way. I will still use the same plan, the same system. And I don't try to, set myself any big goals, or I don't go in it saying I'm going to win this. It's all about just following my plan, following my system. And I know that if I'm patient, I have to, like, I know that the event is probably going to go a long time, but I don't need to be chasing the number. I just need to be patient, and those big numbers will eventually catch up to them. And I think that's the big thing with these events. You can't anticipate how far it's going to go because that's a factor that's outside of your control. Like if you're the winner of this event, it's dependent on who else is there. It's dependent on how far the assist goes. So I'm just going to go there and do my thing, and do the best that I can do. And, I'm confident in my abilities and kind of have an idea of how far I can go. And so as long as I follow my plan, then I should still be standing there at the end. And if I'm not the last one standing, then hopefully I've, still been able to do a really big PB or something like that. There can be a lot of pressure, and I do get like a bit of nerves in the couple of days leading into it. But as soon as the race starts, I'm just a lot more relaxed. I'm calm, I'm confident. And I just try to enjoy the race. Like I know I'm going to be there a long time, so I spend time talking with other people, making it enjoyable, having a good time with my crew, just enjoying being out in nature, even if it is the same course every single hour.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like you are quite good at sort of settling the nerves and managing those expectations. And it sounds like you really are just able to stay in your lane. You're like, I have my plan. I'm going to follow through with what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to take it in. Is there much sort of camaraderie out on course? Because obviously these are your competitors, yet at the same time, like they're helping you get there, right? Like without them, as you've said, like without having whoever the assist is going to be, going as far as they go, you don't have a world record and you don't get the opportunity to really push yourself. So does it feel like, yeah, a sense of camaraderie, or does it feel more like a sort of serious and competitive? Like how did that feel? And in particular, how did it feel at Dead Car Gully?
I think there's definitely a lot of camaraderie in these events, especially in the early days. Like everyone's like keen to share knowledge and help each other get out as far as I can go. There's been events where, I've shared my gear with other people. Like we've been out on a night lap and someone's forgot their headlamp, but I always carry a spare torch with me. So, I'm happy to lend in the torch. And then if someone's having problems with crew or something, I can get my crew to come over and help them. And so there is a lot of like resource sharing and just knowledge sharing. There's definitely a lot of camaraderie. As it gets towards the pointy end, especially as people are a bit more fatigued and stuff as well, it can kind of get that little bit more competitive. I've seen events where people get caught up with mind games and stuff and trying to intimidate the other runners by like running a fast lap or things like that. But for me, I just follow my plan as it is, and I just focus on my own race. At the end of the day, I can't control what the other people do. I'm not out there playing any sort of intimidation tactics or anything. Yes, I was running faster laps at the end of Dead Car Gully, but that's just because that's what it said on my plan. So none of that was to try and psych out Sam or anything like that. But yeah, I think it can depend on who's your assist as well. Like with me and Sam, we were both very determined to win that. Like we both wanted to win it for ourselves. We both wanted to come away with the world record. We didn't need to like try and work with the other person to help each other get to the world record. We're both two very driven people. I just had to have faith in him that he was gonna I knew he was hurting, but I also had faith in him that he was gonna keep pushing until he couldn't anymore. Whereas there's been other events where like I might have clearly looked like the stronger runner, and the other runner who was ultimately going to end up being the assist, they were purely running just to help me get further. So that when I talked about getting the Australian record that first time, when I did the 48 hours, it was down to me and Kevin Matthews at lap. It was early 30s, I think maybe 33 or 34. And I jokingly said to him when it was just us two left, I'm like, "Oh, you ready to go for the Australian record? Like it's just you and me now." Because he'd never expected to be like one of the last two standing.
Mm.
And I kind of said it as a joke, but I think also to put that idea in his head that we could still be here a while. And he really pushed, he really had to dig deep to get to that Australian record, just purely to help me get there. There was a lot of laps where he wasn't having a good time, but he just kept pushing through, and eventually, yeah, he kept working and he got to that lap 47, and I was able to go and run lap 48 and get the Australian record. So yeah, that's an example of one where we kind of did work together to get to that point. But yeah, as I said, it can be a very different experience depending on the person that you're running with.
It's so nice to have that. That's such a unique thing. Like you wouldn't get that in a traditional ultramarathon or in a road race where you kind of need someone to help you get there, which is really nice to be able to share that with him. Do you ever what is it, I guess, that keeps you going? Obviously there's records that you're chasing and you're following your plan and you're just turning up, doing each lap, but are there moments where you ever just get bored? Are there moments where you just think like, why am I doing this? I could just stop now. I'm sure that most people would have these thoughts crossing their mind of just thinking, why am I doing this? What's the point? I could just give up now and I can go home and be comfortable and put my feet up. And what is it for you that keeps you going?
Yeah, I definitely get those moments where I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Like, why have I signed up for another one? But that tends to be early on, like in those first like day or two, even though they're very social in that they are a lot more enjoyable because I've got like lots of different people to talk to. At the same time, I'm thinking, like, I'm not even halfway here. I'm not even a quarter of the way here. And it feels like it's been such a long time. Like, why have I signed up for another one of these? So it can feel a bit tedious, but I've done enough of them now where I know I can kind of look forward and go, I know that when I get to night three is going to be easier. And it kind of does reach a point where you just get into the zone and you just, I don't know, everything just feels good. Like if everything's going right for you, like your nutrition's going right, your sleep's going right, you just get into that zone, and it is actually quite enjoyable to be out there. And even if I am running on my own, I can just get, yeah, just dialed into the pace that I'm running at, and I come back and I get to spend time with my crew and talk with my crew, and we kind of share in this experience together. And yeah, I think what drives me is I really want to see how far I can go. Like I've discovered this thing that I'm good at, and I want to see how far I can take that. So when I get these opportunities to run at these events with other runners who can go really far, like I want to be there with them at the end, and yeah, to see how far I can push myself.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really get into a flow state, which I think probably a lot of people experience in various different sports or hobbies, and it's such an incredible sort of surreal space to be in. And it's really cool that you have this desire to just see what you can do and see where you end up. Do you think it's about testing your physical capacity, or is it about testing your mental capacity, or is it a bit of both? And is that around like, your sort of like identity is around just pursuing sort of uncharted territory? Like, does that feel like that is just you as a whole human, and that sort of concept is something that fascinates you? Or is it, I guess, more specific to this particular event, and I guess the curiosity that started from when you realized you could do this and you're actually really good at it, and that's just kind of spurs you along, and here you are? Like, where do you think you sort of sit, I guess, in your relationship with like pursuing that uncharted territory?
Yeah, I think it's definitely both physical and mental. Like people will say it's much more mental, but you still need to have the physical capacity to run for that long.
Mm.
And yeah, I do like exploring this uncharted territory, and it's not even about, like, sometimes it's not even about what my own potential is, but what the human potential is. And so like before I was a world record holder, I'd look at what these other people could do. And it's like, well, if they can do it, then I should be able to do it. And every time the record got broken, I wasn't like, great, now it's even further out of reach. I was the opposite. I was like, so humans can run that far. That means I can get that far, and maybe I can push it a little bit further. So it actually really inspired me. Whereas if, like, say I was a marathon runner, for example, and, the marathon record got broken, and say someone went and ran a sub 2 hour, I'd be like, oh, like, there's no way I'm going to get that now. Like, why even bother trying? But with a backyard, I think it's the opposite. It's like someone else has done it, so why can't I go do it now? So yeah, it's really like I really want to find that human potential, that human limit, if there is one.
Mm. In chasing that limit, do you feel as though you'll ever be satisfied? Like obviously now having the world record, you're the best in the world. Like for a lot of people, that would be the pinnacle, that would be the top of the top. You could probably happily retire and say, yep, I was the best in the world at that. It sounds like there's a lot more that you want to do, and obviously there's the world champs coming up, and you've got so much more time to keep doing this. Is there a number in mind? Do you feel like you'll ever feel totally satisfied? And if not, does it worry you? Do you think that you'll get to a point and you'll feel like you've got more to give, but maybe you're running out of time, maybe in years and years to come, you're a bit older and things are getting harder and those kind of things. Do you feel like there is a number or a idea or something where you feel totally satisfied? And if not, does it concern you that you're kind of just constantly chasing this thing that you may never ever feel totally satisfied with?
Yeah, it's weird, like a race with no finish line. Like
Mm.
you just wonder, like, what could the theoretical limit be? So yeah, I might, I could get to a number, and like even Dead Cow Gully, like around 119 hours, which is huge, but I still felt so good at the end, and I still felt like I had a lot to give. So even though it's a huge number, it's like, well, still not as far as I could have run.
Mm.
I only had to stop because the assist stopped. But whereas I compare it to like a 24 hour, for example, like that's another race I love doing, and that's got a defined finish line. Like you're starting at a certain time, and you finish exactly 24 hours later. And so when I run these races, and I run a really good, run a really good distance in that, and I kind of can think that's kind of about my limit. Like I might be able to improve a little bit. I still try and work out a way to plan it better or train better to improve that time. But every time I do it, like I think I'm getting closer and closer to that limit. Whereas with the backyard, it still seems so open-ended, like especially, yeah, when I get to the end of these events, and it's happened at let's say the last 3 events I've done, which have all been big numbers, but I've still felt really good at the end. And yeah, I feel like there's definitely a lot more there. And then, yeah, so what is it going to take? Is it going to take me getting to a really big number, but being the assist or being a DNF?
Mm.
Or, just feeling absolutely destroyed and not being able to do another lap to then me be satisfied and say, okay, maybe that is my limit. But in the events where I haven't finished before, so that first one I did and when I DNF'd at Bigs, I still look back on that and I'm like, oh, maybe I could have done one more lap. Maybe that wasn't my limit. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an answer, to be honest. I don't know if it's the type of event where you can ever be satisfied with what you've done. But yeah, outside of the backyard though, there's a lot of events that I want to do. Like I'd like to do a 6-day, I'd like to do a 48-hour. I'd still like to see how much further I can go in the 24-hour space. So even though, yeah, I'm not going to say I'm going to retire from backyards, but that might not become as big as a priority. Like if I've got the world record and if I win the world champs, it's like, what else do I need to prove in that space? Let's go look at some of these other events that I've really wanted to do and see how far I can go in those.
It sounds like with your interest in discovering your potential and human potential, the way you, I guess, orientate yourself around running is very much like looking forward, looking forward. Something that you often hear people say, and I know I've had people say it to me, is like runners are always running from something. And there's this idea that people that do ultras have got some like dark past or some sort of suffering in their current life separate to running or in their childhood life that is painful and awful. And, running is this space to, kind of metaphorically and maybe literally run away from their struggle or potentially, sort of make peace with whatever suffering they had. Like, do you feel like when people say that, they just are really misunderstanding the point of running and the point of ultras and the point of seeking human potential? Or do you think it is really just an individual basis and maybe there are streaks of that in all humans? What are your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, it's definitely a case by case basis, I think. Like I've heard so many stories of people turning to running from, past childhood trauma or, they've been addicted to drugs or alcohol and running has been that thing that has saved them. So yeah, it's definitely a common story amongst a lot of runners. But yeah, for me, I'm not running from anything. I don't have any like dark history or trauma. It's just something that I've found that I really enjoy. It gives me that time to myself each day, something that I'm good at. And I just constantly, like, I like constantly trying to improve myself. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I did have some dark trauma in my past, I might be a better runner. I might have more motivation. I don't know.
That was going to be
But
my
yeah,
next question.
yeah. For me, it's just I enjoy it and I'm good at it, and I just want to see how far I can take it.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And what you said about maybe you'd be better at, and that's something that I've thought about a lot. Like, I wonder how much we actually get, like how much sort of charge we get from having struggle and kind of using that as fuel. I also wonder how sustainable that is as well. Kind of what Soph was saying before about, is there like issues with sort of like constantly chasing the limits? What about your sort of sense of self-worth? Like, you've just said a couple of times it's something that you like, it's something that you're good at, and so why not just continue pushing? Obviously, like there's going to come a point where you will stop getting better, right? Like, as we age in life, right, there'll be a point at which we hit our peak performance and, maybe you'll be 110 and you'll be running a PB. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'd be really surprised, I guess, because like that hasn't happened yet, like at current in humans. Like we don't normally peak at that age. So assuming you're going to follow a somewhat normal path, probably a little bit abnormal, how will you manage with, and maybe you don't want to think about this, but how will you manage not having being really good at ultra marathons or, backyards as your identity and as your thing to, I guess, continue to build your self-esteem? Like, is that something you've thought about, or is it not something you feel you need to think about?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm aware of, and I know that I'm not going to be, I know every runner has a peak period. With backyards, I feel like there's a bit more longevity there. Like you see some um, you know, ultra runners who are, 10, 20 years older than me and still running really good distances. But yeah, it's something that it's like while I'm in my peak period now, like this is where I want to capitalize it. This is when I want to
Mm.
be, doing the world champs and, doing these big events where I can push myself these big distances. And when it does inevitably happen that, I start not running as fast or as far, I feel that's when I'll switch my focus more to those like experience based ultras where it's, going to, a really nice part of the world and doing a course based on where it's set and what scenery and setting it's got and how enjoyable it's going to be. And I think that'll still add purpose to my running. But yeah, I'm definitely very aware of the fact that I'm not going to stay in this sort of fitness level forever.
That's great to be able to shift. And I guess that's the thing with running too. Like, there is so much you can get out of it and so many different ways to approach it, whether it's racing or adventuring, seeing new places. There's so many aspects too. So it's nice to know that, whenever that time comes, you can kind of shift that focus and still enjoy it with a different kind of purpose or outcome. And on this kind of topic of, yeah, maybe the kind of pessimistic topic or looking way in the future, I guess maybe some concerns people might have with ultra endurance sport, with extreme sports, with pushing beyond what I guess the everyday person would consider as normal. And I think everyone's vision and understanding of normal is so different, right? We can have people who are totally sedentary, don't do any exercise, and they could think that running 5Ks is just extreme and crazy and maybe dangerous or bad for your knees or any of those narratives. But have you had people kind of be concerned about your health? Have you had family members or friends, tell you, oh, you shouldn't do that because, maybe it might be bad for your body, or, maybe you're going to be at risk of these kind of health conditions because you're pushing into these extreme limits? Is that something that you, like, you consulting with a doctor? Is it something that you're concerned about, or do you feel as though you're still kind of staying within, I guess, healthy, normal limits?
Yeah, like I haven't really had anyone reach out to me and tell me that they're concerned. I feel like I'm still operating in healthy limits. Like, yes, I'm running 119 hours, but I'm still feel like I'm recovering really well from that. Like I'm still out running the next day. Yes, there have been events where I've absolutely broken myself and had to take a few weeks off running. But, like even if it was doing some permanent damage to me or it was, um, going to cause problems for me later in life, I think I would still be doing what I'm doing because I just, yeah, like tomorrow's never guaranteed. I want to like live in the moment and enjoy this time. Instead of, I could play it safe and just sit on the couch and I don't know, maybe play lawn bowls or something and, live an extra 10 years, but then have I really lived? Like,
Mm.
I really want to have these experiences and put myself in these sort of races and where I'm testing my limits. And like, it's a similar thing like with being a firefighter, I guess, because we're exposed to a lot more in terms of we've got a higher risk of PTSD, we've got a 10 times higher risk of cancer. Something that I take on, like I know this and I know that this job may affect me in my future, but it's a job that I really enjoy. It's a job that really balances well with my lifestyle and I'm able to fit my running in around all of this. And, I work with a great group of people. And so I kind of just see it as if that's the price that I pay for having such a great job, I'd rather do that than, have a job that I just hate going into every day, like sitting at an office desk 9 to 5 and only having the 2 days on the weekend to, get everything else I want to do. Whereas, yeah, at the moment with this job, I never wake up thinking, oh crap, I got to go to work again today. It's like it's always so easy to go into work and we work 10-hour days or 14-hour nights and it never feels like it drags out. I'm never sitting there looking at the clock thinking, how much longer have I got till I get to go home. So yeah, I kind of see that the same as running. Like, yeah, even if it does have some, negative effects later in life, at least I'm living life now, and I'm getting to have these experiences now.
Yeah, that's a really cool perspective. And it's so great to live a life that you love and you like that's your truth. They're the things that you enjoy doing, and to have a job that you aren't bored of and aren't looking at the clock, and to have a hobby that you are very good at and enjoy pushing yourself is really cool. I think it was interesting how you said that you feel like you recover really well, and or more than you feel, you do recover well, and you're bouncing back the next day to go for a run. And so you sort of feel like at the minute you are operating within a healthy range, which it's so interesting because it's such a different, it's actually quite different to what I hear a lot of ultra runners describing. And it is quite varied, but so often I hear people describe their first marathon or their first 50 or first 100 they've ever done. And they are in so much pain. Everything is hurting from top to toe. They are bedridden. I even hear people saying like, oh, after my long run day, I just have to lie down all day and I'm exhausted. And I kind of hear stories like that. And I think, gosh, like that, I don't know how healthy that is, but it sounds like you're not really experiencing that. Like you're genuinely going out, you're doing anything that feels good. You are pushing yourself, yet you're able to recover from it and come back stronger sort of season after season, year after year. But I do think there is kind of this trend at the moment of seeking suffering more so than seeking human potential and pursuing potential. It sounds like to me you're very much more seeking your potential and human potential, but there definitely is this trend of seeking suffering. Where do you sit on that? Like, what is your relationship with suffering? Is that something that you enjoy pursuing in its own sort of right, or is it something that is just a part of it? It's just a feature of it, and you manage it. It's not at all part of the goals that you're curious about.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I seek it, but it's kind of like that type 2 fun. Like, you're not enjoying it when it happens, but when you look back on it, it's a really positive experience. Like, yes, you might have, yeah, been dealing with a lot of pain and it wasn't great at the time, but then to see that you've been able to push through that and overcome it, I think that kind of makes you stronger mentally as a person. But yeah, like as I said previously, like I kind of, instead of trying to get into that pain cave and fighting through it, I'm more about trying to delay that and put that off as long as possible. And then, yeah, when it comes, like I'll deal with it. But um, yeah, I wouldn't say I go chasing it. I'm more chasing like what my potential is, like how far can I run in a backyard? How far can I run in 24 hours? Yes, the pain's going to be a part of that, but if I can, yeah, do it without pain or without as much pain, like then that'll be more ideal. But yeah, and it's like it's kind of like I remember when I did my first marathon and yeah, like super sore the next day, and it kind of like yes, you're sore, but it's also like it's a reminder of I've just done something epic. Like this is my body's way of recovering and telling me like I've done something epic. So and it's the same. Yeah, now it's like I won't get that after a marathon now. But like if I do a 24-hour and the next day, like I'm, struggling to walk up the stairs or something, like yes, it hurts, but I think that's kind of like it's kind of a good sort of pain. It's like I can be really satisfied with my achievement. I can be really satisfied that I've pushed myself to my limit at this event. Whereas if I'd, run the 24-hour then and then the next day I'm running up and down stairs, no problems, I'd be like, maybe I didn't push myself hard enough. Maybe I needed to try a bit harder. Maybe that wasn't my potential. But yeah, I think, yeah, the 24 hours is probably a little bit different to the backyard because, and especially if you win the backyard, you haven't pushed yourself to your limit. Whereas the 24-hour, you want to know that you've squeezed out everything you can to get as far as you can within that 24-hour period.
Yeah, and I guess that the intensity would be so different across those two time frames as well. And yeah, it's really refreshing to hear your perspective on suffering. We will wrap up soon, but I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're feeling for World Champs, what the plan is kind of between now and then. You're just continuing training as you normally would? Are you doing anything differently? How are you feeling about the next little while? It's October, is it, the World Champs?
Yeah, it's in October, so it's 13 weeks away. So I pretty much had the last three or 4 weeks since Dead Cow. I've just kind of been in that like limbo state, like I've been recovering from the event but not yet starting my training for the next one. So I've just been waking up and kind of just, oh, what do I feel like running today? Yeah, I'll go do 10Ks, or yeah, I'll go do a hilly run. But yeah, as of this week, I've actually started my plan. So yeah, it's a lot more structured now, so I know exactly what I'm going to be doing each day. It's very similar for my same plan that I had for Dead Cow Gully. I will be including a bit more hill work and trails because, yeah, the course at Biggs is notoriously difficult for the type of trail that it is. So whereas Dead Cow Gully, yes, it was a trial course, but it was relatively flat. Yeah, Biggs is just, yeah, it's a lot hillier, a lot more single track. There's a lot more like trip hazards and obstacles and stuff like that. So I'll try and get that sort of terrain into my training a bit more. But other than that, my training will be very similar. My planning will all be very similar. I'll be looking at like going over my plan for Dead Cow Gully and kind of copy pasting that, but having a few little tweaks. There's some different rules at Biggs in regards to crew. So whereas at Dead Cow Gully, there was no limit to how much crew I could have and when they could swap in and out. Whereas at Biggs, it's like we can only have one crew on at a time. So there's gonna be some
Wow.
differences in planning there.
Wow.
Wow. That's tough.
Dude, that's so different, isn't it? I feel like that's such a major thing. One crew member just seems like
Yeah,
not
it's
enough.
because they're very, very limited for space there.
Mm.
And like when this event was started, it was going like 50 hours. It's like,
Mm.
one crew was fine. But yeah, now it's gotten so big that I mean, it's one thing to ask the athletes to run for 5 days, but this is their thing. This is what they do. And
Mm.
most of the time the crew is just like a family friend
Yeah.
or, even might just be some person or, another runner and they're not trained for staying awake for 5 days in a row or having these
Mm.
micro naps and all of that. So yeah, we have been told that we can change out crew like every 12 hours, so we can alternate between different crew as long as we change over at the right time. So that is a little bit better than last year or 2 years ago, sorry, when we were only allowed one crew change. So last time I had one
Wow.
person for the first 24 hours and then we swapped out.
Wow.
But I mean, it is what it is. Everyone's running under the same rules there. So yes, I'd like to have more crew, but also I know that I've got my system down pat that we can get by with just one at a time.
And Phil, I'd love to know how many Ks are you running in your peak week for this next race? And is it going to be different to what you did for Dead Cow Gully? I mean, it sounds like it's going to be much the same or similar. What's like your peak mileage?
So my peak week is normally around the 170 to 180K mark. And that will also include a run of kind of anywhere between, say, 80 and 120 Ks. So leading
Mm.
into Big, there's a race which I haven't signed up for yet, but I probably will. It's a 100K race, and I'll use that as a training run, and that'll make up a 100 week.
We will wrap up shortly, but just before we cut off, I was asking about on those sort of peak weeks and you have that big sort of 120K run, do you kind of almost taper a little bit into that, or are you kind of just trying to keep your days just the same and just let it kind of blend into the week? How do you approach that?
No, so there's not really much of a taper going into that bigger run. So I'll gradually build up my mileage leading into that run. And then the week after will be a deload week. And then I'll start ramping it up again. And then I'll have another, like if I can find a 50K race like 2 weeks before, then I'll sign up for a 50K race. Otherwise, I'll just do a 50K run solo somewhere. And that'll be my last long run before the taper.
Wow. And then I'm fairly sure this is like kind of a bit random, but I'm fairly sure I've heard you say on other podcasts that you have a run streak at the moment. Does that mean leading up to the big day? I know that wasn't meant to be a pun, but it was. Are you actually going to run the day before as well? Like, I mean, I know a lot of people like to do a shakeout run, but I assume you're not taking any days off leading up to the big day.
Yeah, that's right. So
Not funny.
yeah, I I try and run every single day. So I did start this back in 2014, and I went for three and
Gosh.
a bit years of doing 5K minimum. I went for 3 and a bit years until I had to stop because I went away for army. But then as soon as I was back from that training, I was back into it. There's had to be times where I've had to stop because, like in the early days of me doing ultras, it was kind of 50-50 of whether I could run the next day or not. But kind of if I had to have a break after one of those big ultras, as soon as I was able to start running again, it was back into the run streak. So I haven't had to have a day off since. So after Bigs 2 years ago, when I talked about having that leg pain at Bigs, I was out, like I couldn't run for like a week and a half after that. But since I've been running again, since recovering from that, I haven't missed a day. So I've done 96-hour backyard, 81-hour backyard, 119-hour backyard. I've done two 24-hour runs. I've still, for all of those events, I've still been able to get out the next day and run at least 5Ks.
Wow.
So yes, I'll definitely be running the day before Bigs and hopefully the day
The
after
day
as well.
after.
I think the problem I'm going to have, and I don't know how I'm going to work this out yet, but when I fly back from America, we actually lose a day. So we fly out on like the Tuesday and we don't get back until Thursday, or I can't remember
What
the
about your
dates, but yeah.
stopover? Can you do a lap of the airport where you change over
Yeah,
flights?
I don't know. I'll have to look at that. I don't. It's because of the time difference as well. We kind of go forward in time. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe I just like
Laps up and
don't
down the
count that
aisle?
as a day. Yeah. Well, when I went to Tennessee last time, I did actually do laps of the aisle, like on the way there. That was just because I wanted to keep my legs fresh. Like I didn't want to
Hmm.
be sitting down for too long. But I ended up probably walking about 5Ks, I reckon, just doing laps of the aisles on the
There you
plane.
go. That could work. Oh, it's so interesting. This has been, yeah, just a fascinating chat. And we're so glad that we could have the time to chat to you. And I know that you're in high demand at the moment with everyone wanting to hear what you're up to and how you're doing these amazing things. So we really appreciate you coming on and spending an hour with us. It's been really interesting. We've learned a lot. And I think it's been really refreshing to hear your perspectives because I think, yeah, there's lots of different characters in the ultra and the endurance kind of trail running space. And it's really nice to hear that really you just love what you're doing and you're really enjoying it and you've got so much passion for it. And yeah, there's no kind of like big ego or anything you're trying to prove. It's really just you're just trying to pursue your potential and see what you can do. And yeah, it's really, really nice. So thank you so much for your time. And we can't wait to follow along in the lead up to World Champs and see how you go on the day or the days, the
Yeah.
week.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. You've had some really good questions.